let me welcome Una O'Hagan to studio. And it's lovely to see you.
Thank you, Ryan. Good to see you.
We were just talking the brief time you sat down, and I said, "How are you?" And then I thought, is it one of the more ridiculous questions to ask somebody who's just been bereaved? How are you? How do you feel about that question?
No, I think it's the right question to ask, because I think what's worse is if somebody doesn't mention or refer to the fact that you've had somebody who has died. Yeah. When somebody asks you how you are, it gives you the opportunity. The power is with you to say if you want to open up or not, or if you want to do the real Irish thing, I'm fine or I'm grand. But it does open up that possibility of saying, you know what, I'm not doing so well today.
Gives you a choice.
It gives you a choice. Yeah. And I think Irish people are very good at that. We're open about death, and we're very good at the ritual of death. We don't hide away from it.
You kind of alluded to something there, Una, which was that some people don't like it at all either. Some people don't want to know. So I'm sure you've met people in the last 2 months since Colm died and who have become a little awkward maybe around you, or certainly around the language of grief.
Yes.
And they're not bad people.
No.
They just aren't equipped.
Absolutely. And what they don't want to do more than anything is make you upset.
Right.
Or put their foot in it.
Yeah.
Or sound awkward. But I try and put people at their ease. I don't have any difficulty talking about Colm. I might get a bit weepy, which might make people a bit uncomfortable.
Well, it might make them...
that's the way it is,
It might make them realise that you're human and have emotions, and that's what that is all about. Let me say from the get-go, I was a big fan of Colm Keane's.
He was a great fan of yours.
You're nice to say so, but
No, he was, because I don't know whether you know, he was... the head of radio told him that he was to keep an eye on you when you came in.
He wouldn't be the first.
No, and you had a meeting with you, and bought you coffee, and
right.
He came came home, and he said, "Ryan Tubridy doesn't need any looking after."
Yeah, that's so nice. Yeah, I didn't know that, but I mean, I met Colm, and he would have been a mentor of sorts actually, because he would have taught us how radio worked, and I loved his we were only reminiscing recently about his the Loving Spoonful. I always talk about.
Yeah.
You remember those rock and roll programs he did?
Fantastic.
And they were great, but he taught us about radio and about listening and about these different things. He worked as a producer and a reporter, and he was. I found him very warm, extremely affable, but also really. And this is why I was at a great conversation with somebody that said, "What is it you need in life?" And we all agreed over a pint or two. It was curiosity.
Yes.
If you're curious, you'll never be bored.
No, absolutely.
And he had that.
Yeah. Ed Mulhall used to be the head of news, worked with Colm for a long time as a producer. After Colm died, he described him beautifully, which was a force of nature. And he was endlessly curious about people. He wanted to know, I know that phrase, he loved telling stories.
Yeah.
He loved letting other people tell their stories,
Yes, yeah.
And he always thought the best pictures were on radio. Yeah. I don't know whether you remember Italia 19.
Yeah.
And Colm was the producer of the summer series then with Pat Kenny. And he said he had the amazing idea of sending Nell McCafferty to Italy.
What a great idea. It's turning everything on its head.
It is, absolutely. I mean, so left field, there wasn't even a field. And I remember him coming home and saying, I said, yeah, that's wonderful. Because, the best pictures are on radio. She was a wordsmith. She created wonderful pictures. And she won a Jacobs Award for it. Yeah. But he had great curiosity about everything,
In the brief time we've talked, you've said something twice that really strikes a chord with me, which is, and then he came home and said.
Yeah.
He came home and said, your man's grand. He came home and said, Nell McCafferty. You obviously had that class of relationship. He'd work all day, and you'd work all day, I should say. But you came home and said.
Yes.
How was your... Yeah. Isn't that the beauty of the great relationship? That
it is.
That you really look forward to going home to saying, how was it for you? Yeah. And tell me.
And that's the thing I miss most, because every now and again I think, I must tell Colm that. And like we were together for 36 years, and over the years I've watched people kind of in couples in restaurants or in pubs or whatever, and they sit there, they don't say a word to each other.
I don't
and I'm thinking,
it.
what are they there for? Whereas we just never stopped talking.
Yeah.
And it was a great exchange of ideas. Now, he wasn't always the easiest to work with because he had a particular idea. He grabbed an idea, he ran with it,
Driven.
he knew what he wanted to do with it. And we worked on a number of books together, and I'd be trying to put the elbow in and saying, would you not think this? Would you not think that? Or whatever. And if he was unmoving, sorry, I've just hit the microphone. If he was unmoving, I would say, God, you're very hard to work with, Colm. And he'd said, that's not what Burt Bacharach said. And the problem was that Burt Bacharach, when he had done an interview with him, had signed his CD saying, great to work with you, Colm.
Yeah.
So this was always a comeback. I could never get around
He had
it.
written evidence from Burt Bacharach, one of the greatest song composers of all time. So it was hard to come back to that.
It was, absolutely. But we had a wonderful kind of... simpatico, kind of sounding board kind of relationship.
How did you meet?
We met in the RTE canteen.
God
and
help
there's
us.
nothing romantic. There's nothing more
There's
to
nothing
say.
romantic about the RTE canteen, let's face it.
No matter, even if you'd had 10 pints, it wasn't going to be romantic.
Never.
Colm had been seconded over to Morning Ireland. It was the whole gang of people after, having breakfast. I looked at him, he looked at me. He rang me, even though he said I rang him. I didn't.
We have a little historical record issue here.
We do, yeah.
Okay.
You Wore Blue, that song.
Yes, I know the one.
It's not Charles Aznavour.
Yes, I remember it well.
That's it. And then we just kind of took it from there,
Okay, so it was a meeting on the campus here in RT, and what struck you about him? I mean, ultimately, when you did go date him and what have you, what was it about him?
What you spoke about before, his endless curiosity and enthusiasm.
You found that very attractive.
Things. Yeah, I like that. I like people who are engaged and who want to do things. Mm-hmm. In a way, I'm kind of the opposite, pretty kind of like him, but bit more of the opposite. I would be more kind of laid back. I would have my own kind of interests and hobbies and what I would be very, very interested in. But Colm seemed to be interested in absolutely everything. But he also, believed that you should be interested in what he was interested in. So that was the line of least resistance.
That's
I
funny.
remember going to a match, I think it was like our second date, and it was Shamrock Rovers playing a semi-final, FAI Cup semi-final, in the pouring rain. And I thought, oh my God, this is the choice. Do I have to put up with this?
This is commitment.
This is commitment.
Yeah.
So I went with it.
Okay, well, and you had a happy life together by the sounds of things. I mean, I only saw you from the outside. I knew you a little bit in passing, and you things were going very, very well. But I suppose in some ways, I had the pleasure when he was a little boy of meeting your son Sean.
Yeah.
Do you remember me?
Yes,
meeting
I do.
You very kind of gave it. I think it was a toy cat to my youngest,
That's
or to
right.
my oldest, as she is now.
Yeah.
And you, he. I remember him. If you don't mind me bringing his name up, because he, as the toy show guy, I get to meet a lot of children in the course of my life. But I remember his brightness.
Yeah.
And I really mean that. I'm not trying to falsely remember something to help you along or help this conversation along. I sincerely remember him being a very bright boy and a very kind boy and a very engaging boy and engaged
he took after his dad in that way.
Well, I'd say his mother had a part to play too. I don't want to take away from that either.
No, but it's interesting you talk about his brightness because on his gravestone it says bright shining star in Latin, which we got your old Latin teacher to translate. Miss Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
She was Sean's Latin teacher as well.
Amazing.
And he was wonderful.
Yeah.
Really lovely.
He people will who don't know your story will immediately say, did she just say gravestone?
Yeah.
Because they won't know what happened to Sean. I'm not going to make you say, I don't want to bring you somewhere uncomfortable other than to say, to ask you what happened to him.
Yeah.
If that's okay with you, and take your time.
I'll be brief.
And please do, and we'll all understand that. But just to put everything in context, and don't be uncomfortable.
Yeah, when he was 17, he got cancer, osteosarcoma in the right leg.
Yeah.
It had spread to the lungs, and after 2.5 years, he died.
Yeah. And that is the great unimaginable and the great aberration in time. Yourself and Colm had to live with that. And I wonder what Sean's death did to you as a couple, or to you as a person. Do you mind me asking you that?
It shattered both of us separately and together. I remember after the funeral, I put my hand in Colm's hand, because there was the kind of question, what do we do now? The world has ended. Yeah. And we went home, but actually one of the things that really kept us together, and it's an odd little observation, that night Colm had a terrible cold, and I remember I said, I'll make you some lemsip, and I was doing it in the kitchen, and I had looked after Sean for 2.5 years, and I needed somebody else to look after.
Yeah. And you looked after Colm.
Yeah.
And the lemsip was a bridge of sorts. Isn't that a strange thing to say?
Yeah.
A way back. You said something very profound there, which was you were shattered together and apart. I'm trying to work my way through what that means. I presume
we both handled it separately.
Okay.
In our own way. Colm could not deal with Sean's illness, which I understand. And I think a lot of men find that very difficult to deal with.
How did that manifest itself?
He worked a lot.
Okay.
A lot. And I think he felt like he couldn't do anything.
Powerless.
Yeah. Whereas I was running around, I was cooking to beat the band, I was feeding Sean up, I was arranging medical appointments, I was, with chemotherapy and all that kind of thing, you have a schedule of tablets that you have to give. And so I was absorbed in that, and I was working in here. And that kind of kept my brain going. Yet I was shattered too. But it's very difficult in that situation when something is so deep to actually kind of come back together. And that took a lot of time.
I spent pretty much all day on Saturday as having spent some time with him on Friday evening with Barry McGuigan.
Oh, yeah.
Whose daughter died.
Yes.
And, I spoke to Barry on by Zoom on the Late Late Show about a year ago or thereabouts. And he could hardly finish a sentence. And that word you use, shattered, it's a great expression, because it's the right expression, not great expression, the right expression. And on Saturday with Barry, we travelled together to Crowpatrick, and then we ascended and descended much of the hill together, the mountain. And I got the sense from him, he's such a lovely human being, as are you, and I got the sense from him that it's never, ever very far.
No, it's never over.
It's never, but it's just so close to your throat or somewhere.
Time is a funny thing. I know this happened, 14 years ago or whatever, yet it feels like yesterday at the same time. Yeah. There's that weird sense of time shifting. The only thing I will say to people who have undergone this loss is that, and it's a cliche, but cliches are cliches for a reason.
Precisely.
Time does help. You end up remembering the good things, the fun you had, rather than the bad times. Did you have
a lot of fun with Sean when he was?
Oh, brilliant!
Was he a fun son to be around?
He was great.
What did he like to do? What was he into?
Good temper. Well, I tell you, when I think of sort of happiness,
let's go
Sean,
there for a minute. Yeah,
I remember we were one summer walking down, the second lake in Glendalough, down towards the abandoned mine, and I just remember Colm and Sean were ahead, talking away, yakking away as they always did. They had a great relationship. I was strolling along behind, probably carrying the picnic. And Sean was dressed in it was kind of like a cycling gear. It was so cool at the time. The shorts, the multicoloured top. And of course, he was 7 or 8. And as a boy of that age, you just want to wear the one thing every single day.
Sure.
I don't know what it is. So I used to have to crawl in at night, take the clothes, try and dry them and get them ready. And that to me sums it up. It was the simple times that we enjoyed, that kind of mundane family life. That was the best time.
Remember a friend of mine being in a bit of bother not too long ago. And I said to him, your brain is a computer hard drive. Just access the good stuff.
Yes.
And while the bad stuff is going on now, you've got loads of these little files.
Yeah.
So just go to Glendalough, play the file,
and
go to that place.
Yeah.
Isn't that what rather than be stuck in the quicksand of unpleasantness.
Absolutely. It just it's almost like, say it's almost like a scale. And when Sean's death happened, it was all black. Yeah. But then gradually, as the years went by, there was more and more kind of light and happiness came back into it. I don't know how it happens. And I don't think there's a time. I don't think there's a schedule. I don't think people can get annoyed with other people and say, oh, come on, get on with it. It's up to each individual person how they get through it, you know?
You wrote books together with Colm, and you've been talking about... and we talked about it before as well, about near-death experience and your mutual interest in that. And I think I get the sense that people need to know that this was not to do with Sean.
No.
This wasn't some sort of you guys grasping at spiritual straws.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
And you want to be
I'm
clear
so
about
glad
that.
you said that.
Okay, because I didn't want to get ahead of myself or to offend you in any way. But I get the sense that this was a much broader scenario for you. Do you want to talk to me about that?
Well, as you said, Colm was endlessly curious.
Yeah.
But also, his father died when he was aged 11. I think that had a big influence on him. I don't think he ever got over it. Yeah. And I was thinking about this last night. I'd been talking to your producer, Jack, and he just prompted something. I think Colm was trying to find the answers for a very, very long time. You know, what are we doing here? What happens when we die? Is there a God? Is there a heaven?
Yeah.
What is a good life? Are we judged? All those kind of
existential
issues. Yes. And like Colm used to say, we plan for a trip away, 2 weeks in Spain. We think about it, we organise it, we get the clothes ready, we pack and yet for the biggest journey that we will make in our life, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to think about it.
Death.
Yeah. We're very good in Ireland at the ritual stuff. We're very good after death. It's the bit before that we have a real difficulty with. But like Colm had researched the near-death experience. I remember him taking out an article from it was a Wexford paper, a man who had undergone a near-death experience. And that was around the early 90s. And it was Sean... didn't get ill until 2004.
Yeah, so it was there. Do you think Colm found some peace in his research that allowed him to accommodate death at the end?
Oh, totally.
Really? In a positive way?
In a totally positive way. He said, I know where I'm going. I am going to the light. And this is a very important thing because Colm, in this book, The Journey's End, yes, which he had wanted to publish himself before he died, but didn't have the time.
I cut across you only to say that he was meant to be sitting where you are now.
Exactly.
Just for listeners to know, Jackie, who you mentioned, was talking to Colm to say, look, we're looking forward to, Ryan's looking forward to you coming in to have the chats, and then he got too sick.
Yeah.
And then, if you don't mind, we'll say that now, that then he died.
Yeah. That was on the Friday.
Yes.
He was talking to Jack, and he was admitted to hospital on the Monday, and that following Friday he died. That's how quickly it happened. So he wanted... that was the one thing that caused him any agitation, was you have to bring the book out. And I said I would.
And that's it.
And that's what I'm doing.
And what a title of a book, given what happened. I mean, like, you could say it's cosmic or something, but Journey's End is the book. Let me ask you about Colm's Journey's End then, just for a moment, because it ties in with the question I was asking before I interrupted, which was this sense that he knew where he was going. And you said going to the light. Does the light, is that a religious light, or is that a spiritual light, or how would you describe that?
Colm described it very well. He said the most important feature that sums up heaven is the presence of the light. It's where we want to go.
Yeah.
He said it is love, joy, happiness like you've never known before, and also complete understanding of everything, implying that it's our consciousness that survives after death. And he said he was absolutely of the belief that death is not an end, but the beginning of something entirely new.
Right.
And that our consciousness survives and creates, and we therefore then live on in a reality of our own making. And that it's not, if you think about, we're all taught, clouds in heaven, we'd be playing harps, big beards, and St. Peter at the gate with the big book and all that. It's not like that at all.
Yes.
You have to put that out. It's much more sophisticated than that.
Yeah, that sounds almost feels like for children.
It is. Well, I think it was an attempt. Like, language is not very good at explaining stuff like this. I think it was people's attempt to explain what happens when we die. But that you have to put that to one side. It's a non-physical kind of place.
You were with Colm when he breathed his last breath, and you held his hand. Mm-hmm. Did you get a sense that he was a man at peace? Yes,
he was very much into a bit like George Harrison from the Beatles, that you had to prepare for death. And that was more to do with, even though he had done his list of, my top 20 songs and picked these for my funeral. And I'm not being smart, he was always saying that you have to look back on your life, weigh up how you've been, how you have lived your life. And he had done that. He knew where he was going, and it was such a privilege to be with him. It was in the Waterford Hospice. I held his hand. I told him I loved him. I told him that Sean loved him, that he was a great dad, and that he'd left a wonderful legacy. And it was kind of, again, into this, tying in with the journey's theme.
End, yeah.
It was like, when you're on a flight.
Yes.
And you're coming into land and it's the perfect flight. Mm-hmm. You feel the engines slowing down. Mm-hmm. And that was Colm. It was the engine slowed and slowed and slowed. And then you find you're on the ground and it's just so peaceful. And he just slowed and slowed and then passed away. And there was such a sense of peace when he died. It was incredible.
How have you been?
Okay, actually, okay, because Colm said just sort of about a week before he passed away, he said, "You know what? I think you will be fine."
Really?
And he had done a lot of preparation to make sure that I would be, just practicalities. But he said, "Yeah." I'm doing okay. I kind of after 36 years, it feels slightly as if half of you is gone, or you've lost your right or whatever. But I know he's in a good place, and I know, as he says, your consciousness creates the reality that you want. You meet the people that you want to meet. Okay. And I know he'll be he wherever he is, he's with Sean and with the people he loves.
And you believe that Colm and Sean are maybe wandering wherever it is together.
Absolutely, yeah.
Catching up.
Yeah, yeah.
Holding each other, if you can, do so in that way you talk of the consciousness. That must give you great strength in a day.
It does, absolutely. I'm glad you said strength rather than comfort. When people say, "Oh, that must be a great comfort," I always think that it kind of implies that it's a sort of a comfort blanket that you're carrying around.
Isn't that cute?
Isn't that cute? Yeah. God love you.
No one needs that in their lives.
You're demented by grief. So that's,
no, I understand.
But
strength, back to that word,
it gives a great strength, consolation. And like, I've gone on this journey with Colm through all the books, and I've understood a lot of where he was coming from. And the great thing about this book is that it's not just the near-death experience, because in the near-death experience, people come to a border or boundary and stop. This is where he tries to go beyond that. And he's done that by, reading the science, all the religions.
The history.
History.
It's infused with the past.
Oh, absolutely. Even going back to, say, Newgrange, just in our own little patch of the world, how that is built on light.
That's why
and the importance of it.
Right. And that's why the book is you talk about how poorly prepared we are in life for death, as opposed to the rituals after, which we're all great at.
Yeah.
But this book offers some class of manual, almost like to talk about to use your aviation theme, like a flight manual for the way out.
Absolutely, a route map.
A route map. I think that's what the book does.
The other thing, though, that you have to remember is that there is a thing called a judgment. We don't get away scot-free, and it's not like St. Peter at the pearly gates. We do have to kind of deal with a reckoning, as it were, and a judgment. Sometimes this happens in the presence of the superior being or God, but more often we do it ourselves. And this review happens very quickly. We go through our whole life. And I thought, okay, I judge myself. That's fine. I'll give myself a pass. I'll go straight to heaven. But actually, it's more complicated than that. Colm says you judge what you've done through the eyes of other people and the impact that you have had on other people. And he says, very important that you do that review before you die. Because otherwise you might have to end up, doing a fairly, like there was a story of a woman called Anne, and she knew she hadn't been that bad, but she hadn't been that good. It was relationship to do with her mother. And she realised that she would have to do something about that. And then she felt this wonderful sense of forgiveness, came back and repaired her relationship with her mother. So we have to do that kind of work before we die.
I was looking at you talking, and I was completely captivated by you talking about this story, Anne, and I find myself going, we've been talking about Colm as a communicator and as a curious person. You have that skill in spades yourself, I mean, I hope that I'd love you to do talks and to visit, I don't know, places that might want to hear, certainly about your books, a book tour of some sort, but you do it so well, if you don't mind me saying so.
Yeah, oh God. Do you know what? I could talk on radio or on television, no problem, but in front of real
public speaking. Isn't that funny?
Oh,
you throw in an audience in your goose, are you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, come on, Una, I can't believe it.
No, I mean, studios are just lovely and warm and
radio
comforting.
is a warm medium, as
absolutely,
you know. Much nicer. Claire says, I'm utterly captivated, there's the word, by this wonderful woman and this interview. Her understanding of love, grief and life is a lesson to us all. Another says, what a beautiful lady Una Huygen is. You are an amazing woman to listen to. Your story is heartbreaking, but what a positive attitude, a truly beautiful lady. Una speaks, says Louise in Cork, too, so lovingly about Colm and Sean, and eloquently about her grief of losing both. And these conversations are so useful to help us learn how to genuinely accommodate people's grief rather than avoid the unmentionable, which must be so isolating. Another says, what a resilient, softly spoken, beautiful lady, bearing her cross of grief and loss with such grace. My heart is breaking for her in tears. In my kitchen, Sean and Colm were so lucky to have Una in their lives, and I wish her all the best for the future. And may they rest in peace. Pat Smith getting nostalgic when he says, when Miss O'Hagan read the news was the star. What a nice way of putting it.
Actually, that is a real compliment.
That's a real compliment.
Yes.
So
he's made my day.
Yeah. After all that, could you tell Una a huge thank you for all the wonderful books on near-death experience and saints that were written by herself and Colm. Such a comfort for people and a much-needed nod to our spiritual side, said Maura McCann in Wicklow. And listening to Una, says Maeve, my late mum was also a force of nature and always maintained an interest in life and never refused an invitation to an event. That's what kept her going, and she did not go gentle into the good night, as the poem says. And Joan says, lovely to listen to Una. I was 36 years married to my wonderful late husband too, and like Una, I often wondered about couples out to dinner without a word between them. I can relate so much to Una and what she's saying during this great interview this morning. And Laura says, I remember Una from school in Eccles Street.
Hey,
and being in awe there, I get to mention, and being in awe of her depth of knowledge and ability in the debating society. Well, in order to debate, you had to do it in front of all your peers. That's a hard one.
Yeah, but when you're a teenager, you fear nothing.
That's true. Love listening to Una this morning. I had the pleasure of teaching their gifted son, Sean, in first year, already an independent thinker at 13.
Yeah.
It's from Mary, a retired teacher.
Yeah.
So
actually, Colm was particularly proud. He always said to Sean, make up your own mind.
Yeah.
Think
for yourself.
Think for yourself.
Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thanks, Ry. I've enjoyed it.
I hope you have, because you're remarkable. 2 months after the passing of your beloved husband, and he was a friend of so many people around here, and so many years after the passing of your beautiful son, Sean, for you to come in here to speak like this so frankly and so elegantly and so eloquently and with such dignity is a mark of who you are. So thank you. I wish you every happiness as much as possible, and in the dark days, I wish you every light.
Thanks, Ryan.
You know, Hagan. Thank you for your time.